So first of all, thank you so much to you all for joining me today. I'm not sure I would have made the time to join such a talk on money when I was in your situation. Um, so just to give you a heads up, if you have all these things in place, oh, where am I? De-dum, de-dum. If I can get if you have all these things in place, um, then don't waste your time listening to me because you could probably learn teach me a few things. However, if this is more like how well you're managing your excess income at the moment, you might get some value from the next 40 minutes or so. Um, just to be clear, I am not an expert on pensions, and I'm not a financial advisor. However, I have been in your shoes, and since I retired from the NHS 3 years ago, I've built a property business, and I've been studying from people with hugely successful business and others who study the economy. So I just wanted to raise your attention to a few things that are a little bit concerning in our economy, both current and predicted, that could potentially affect the NHS pensions in the future, which you may or may not be aware of. If you are and you've been discussing options with your financial advisor, then great. Maybe we can work together in the future to build your property portfolio if property is one of your investment choices. But if not, then I hope the information I'm sharing with you will hopefully be of some value and food for thought. First of all, the important thing to say is that the NHS pension is currently probably the best, or certainly one of the best pension schemes on the globe. And although it is not as generous as it was with previous generations of doctors, it provides a guaranteed income that increases in line with inflation. The pot is ring fenced, it's unaffected by markets, and it's funded by current contributions and government funding. And I'll come back to the significance of this government funding part in a little while, particularly relevant for the younger members of the audience. So this is what I'm going to cover on the first half or so of this talk. All the reasons why doctors probably need assets. I say probably, but actually I think it's, definitely need assets. Um, but just before we get started, I did want to take about 6 minutes or so just to let you know a little bit about me, because many of you will not know me. And I want to explain my journey from being 100% focused on NHS work and having no interest in money to being here talking to you today about something that has been completely alien to me most of my life. Now, if you've read the introduction that Tom circulated, you'll know that I started the property business to fund a project in Malawi. But there was a journey before and after that, and I'd like to share that with you if you'll indulge me for a little while. So I was a career registrar, a specialist registrar, a research registrar, a part-time senior specialist registrar, and any other name you wanted to give me as a junior doctor in this hospital before I was appointed as a consultant anaesthetist in 2002. And I only went into anaesthetics to become an intensive care consultant, and I was en route to achieve that, or really head towards that. But one event in 1998 changed my whole career trajectory, and I mention it because I think it's important that we understand opportunities arise where we least expect them. So I had a massive PPH in this hospital as a result of ignorance and neglect from the midwives who were assigned to look after me. And I'm only here today, to be honest with you. I'm not dead 27 years ago because my husband ran the theatre and got fluids and sympathomimetics to administer to me and administered to them to me before the crash call was made. So that by the time the crash team arrived, I had regained consciousness and a pulse. I subsequently lobbied the Scottish Government for years until they provided enough funding for NES, which was well before the Scottish Multidisciplinary Maternity Development Programme became part of NES. We developed a course called the Scotty course, in that which was just to help midwives recognize women who were healthy and watch as they deteriorate and recognize them deteriorating as well as other maternity emergencies. And we rolled that out through Scotland. We also developed another course for maternity high dependency care. And so basically, when I became a consultant in 2002, I was mainly an obstetric and vascular consultant, obstetric and vascular anaesthetist. Um, I was chair of the Regional Transfusion Committee for several years. I set up the maternity anemia service, and these are another few things that I set up during my time as a consultant in NHS Tayside. So to be fair, I guess there was a decent fallout for humanity after the near miss at the birth of our first child. And to be honest, I couldn't have told you during that time how much I earned on any of those years because it was enough and we didn't really have to think about money. And like many of you, I was completely focused on the NHS and my family. And I certainly didn't think a lot about investments or additional income streams. And then in 2005, we had the Make Poverty History Week, and I founded a charity which was providing postgraduate education in anaesthetics, intensive care, and pain medicine to colleagues in Malawi. And then that during 2012 and 2015 to 2015, we adapted the Scotty course that we had developed in Scotland and delivered that to 3 centres in Malawi. And that, resulted in a decrease in maternal mortality of up to 70% in a couple of the centres. And these are a few of the snaps from then, just some holiday snaps really, but you can see that all the instructors are Malawians because we also spent a lot of time teaching Malawian colleagues to be instructors on the course in an effort to embed sustainability for the course in each of the regions. In 2014, I was off from December until the following November with a burnout. And yes, so probably not surprising. But anyway, I returned to work in 2015 and had to readjust my boundaries and look after my health. And as part of that, I also studied values-based reflective practice here in Nine Wells, but supervised from Ness, and was very involved with staff support, especially for our theatre nurses. And in 2020, just around about that time as well, 2016, the Malawi government asked us if we could roll the course out through the whole of Malawi because they liked the impact that the course had on maternal mortality. And I had in the past been successful in securing a couple of big grants, one for 250,000 and lots of smaller grants to deliver the previous work. And so I set about trying to raise money, but was unsuccessful in many attempts. And those of you who know how much effort it takes, your evenings and weekends and holidays, even when you're working a full-time clinical job, doing grant applications, it's just soul destroying them when you're not successful. So I attended a property education course in 2020, and that looked, from what I was being taught, as though it might be an alternative way to raise capital to fund the Malawi work. For those of you who do have a business on the side, you'll know how stupid I was and completely naive about business to have believed that that was the case. But anyway, that's what I thought. So I thought that the property business would be a more efficient way for me to raise money and fund the work in Malawi rather than doing grant applications. However, I did learn after a year that a property investment is not a get rich quick vehicle. And in fact, spending months writing endless grant applications is probably a more efficient way to get funds quickly. So I was back at work then doing all that stuff, and I was already en route, sadly, to a second burnout. And in 2022, I took early retirement, and it took about 6 months to recover. And during that time, I redid the original property investment course and started my property business. And I now have 9 buy-to-lets, all tenanted with great tenants, and a business is just ticking over nicely. So part of my driver to talk to you today was to help you recognize that your own health is a precious commodity. And you should cherish it and not sacrifice it to the NHS like I did. So basically, don't do what I did, do what I say. And so just actually, if it's possible to put into the chat box, I don't know if any of you can put into your chat box, um, the difference between assets and liabilities. If anybody's interested in just, I don't know if I can see the chat box with this. Um, I can't see anything coming up in the chat box, so maybe nobody's playing the game. Assets makes money, liabilities drain money. Spot on, absolutely brilliant, Ben. So that's it in a nutshell. Assets put money into your pocket, liabilities take money out. So into the chat box again. Then, what can you give me a couple of examples of assets? Be brave. Into the chat box. Tell me an example of an asset. Is there no, is there are loads of you sitting and watching this, hopefully, a house. By that, Julia, do you mean a home? If you mean, and Anna says houses. So, um, book contract. Oh, yes, if it's bringing you in money, houses, cars, precious metals. Yes, now we're talking. Who's that? MT. Your own home, gold, shares, lands, and property. Exactly. So you've got the picture. In general, your own home is not an asset because as it doesn't put money in your pocket. It might be an asset for future generations, for your children, or for yourself later in life when you've had some capital growth and you sell it and you make some profit, which you can then use to fund something else. That's the only time when your home is an asset. Otherwise, your home absorbs your money. But we all tend to believe that our home is an asset. But in fact, you're absolutely right. The assets are things like cash in the bank accounts if they're making interest, property, land, investment, like stocks, bonds, crypto, gold, art, all those sorts of things. But all of these things are quite obviously liabilities. So they drain money from your account. And I want to just kind of talk about why doctors need assets because we are high income, we're high earners. We do have a high income, but a high income does not mean financial freedom. Making a lot of money is great. It opens doors, it creates options, and can fast track your goals. But income alone doesn't equal financial freedom. So financial freedom basically isn't about how much you earn, it's about how much you keep and what you do with what you keep. So, because I've worked with people who are earning hundreds of thousands of pounds per annum, but they're spending that. And I've worked with people who have got like about a third of that as their income or even less, and they're still managing to serve. So it comes down to how much you use your income and not just how much you make. There are a couple of great books I would recommend if you haven't already read them. I'm sure some of you have, but if you haven't, they're kind of the basic Bibles for anybody who's trying to start a business or understand finance and investments. But lifestyle creep is real, and when our income increases, our spending usually increases, often in line with income, but sometimes at a faster rate. And these are the sorts of things that absorb our money: school fees, well-being trips, another bike, especially if you're a consultant, well, a surgeon or an anaesthetist and nine wells, you certainly have at least 3 or 4 bikes each, which are great for your health, but absorb your additional spending. Family trips away, meals out, holidays, same bike. Um, Trips to the theatre, teaching your kids essentials and yourself essential skills like surfing, sailing, skiing, speaking French, all the S's. And of course, the obligatory family home, the maybe obligatory yacht, the classic car or Lambo, maybe it's traveling the world, the Chihanzais, golf clubs, more Barkers, Yorks, or Adidas, whatever it is. Most of us end up in a situation where our lifestyle needs absorb our income, no matter how much we earn. So earning more doesn't help us become wealthier. Every pound is spoken for, and you're not building wealth. So the people who build true financial independence create a margin, the gap between their income and expenses, and they put that margin to work. So this graph here, for those of you who do have annual meetings with your financial advisor, and you have to do that really boring exercise of sitting down with an Excel spreadsheet and working out where all your outgoings are, and then account for them to the financial advisor. You'll be familiar with this on an Excel spreadsheet thing. Um, but so as an NHS doctor, you're getting your net income directly, and everything's subtracted obviously before you get it. So if you look at where your outgoings are going, this is what they recommend: about a third of your net income going into savings, and from that, then you deciding where, after you've got your emergency fund ready, where you're making your investments and how you're best using that money to ensure that it's not wasting away and it's not being frittered away on other things. So the bottom line is, a high income is a powerful tool, but without a plan, it can slip through your fingers just as fast as it comes in. So don't let lifestyle outpace your goals. Enjoy your life, but use your income to build margin, and use that margin to build real freedom. Now, let's just talk about savings for a moment. If the bank interest rates are not higher than inflation rates, your money is losing value in the bank. And here's why. If you look here at the bank rate, these are the interest rates since 1990. And so the green line, you can see interest rates were huge. This is where we were all dying when we were paying 1.5 or 2% above the Bank of England rate on our mortgage. It was an absolute killer. But inflation was lower. But move along now to there after the economic crash. Inflation remained, less than it was, but certainly, 4 to 5%. But interest rates were here. So if you had money sitting in the bank getting 1% interest, and the inflation rate was 3 to 4%, you can imagine it doesn't take a genius to work this out, but I'm going to spell it out anyway. If you have £100 here and you invest it and leave it in the bank, and this, here the inflation rate is 1%, and here it is 5%. So something that costs £100 here is going to cost in 2010 is going to cost £104 in 2012. So if you buy the thing here when you have the £100, it costs you the £100 that you have. If you put your money into the bank and you get interest in the money, you've been getting 1% interest the whole time. So you've got, compound interest. So maybe you get £1.50 or something with the compounding of it. But keep it simple. Let's say interest rates are 1%. You get to here, 2012, and you have £101. But this item has increased in price by inflation. So it's £104. So what you were able to afford then with your money, the same amount of money, you cannot afford now because of inflation. And even with the interest you got in the bank, you still cannot afford to purchase it because the interest rate is so much lower than inflation rate. Now, the other component of this is, if you do not have that money saved in an ISA where you don't pay tax on your interest, then if you just have it in an ordinary savings account, you will pay tax on the £1 interest that you got. So that's 40%. So you're going to have £100 and 60 pence to purchase the item for £104 that you could have purchased, earlier on for £100. So that's a fairly simple example, but hopefully it makes you understand how important this graph is. And basically, currently inflation is 3.8%. The best savings rate I could find yesterday is 4.35%. So essentially, the actual interest rate, if you have money in an ISA right now with this best rate that I could find, the interest rate you're actually getting in reality is 0.55%, which is, pants, as is known in the trade. So interest rates must be considered in the context of inflation rates to really know if your money will retain value. So that's depressing enough, but simple to sort out, and it doesn't take a genius to work out that you look for the best rates. Don't put your money anywhere except in an ISA, where you're not going to pay tax, and then the rest of the money put into investments where you will get a proper return on your money. The next thing to depress you with is that the UK economy is heading south, and you may or may not be aware of this. I didn't pay any attention to this when I was working because I didn't, we are really protected as public servants, as well-paid public servants who know that there's a good pension plan for us further down the road. But there are some of these things that I think now are important for you to be aware of. Um, the economy is heading south for these reasons. There's slow growth, mostly because the private sector activity is constrained by elevated uncertainty, by restrictive monetary policy and high financing costs. So they're paying more for their debt and overdrafts. So businesses are reporting squeezed margins and very muted investments. The other thing is that the UK inflation remains higher than most of the other G7 nations. And so this autumn, it peaked at 4%, which is well above the Bank of England's 2% target. And it's not expected to return to that target until mid-2026. Um, we had these, you'll have heard about all of these, don't affect us much as well, apart from costs in shops, but it'll affect some of our lower paid colleagues. And this is the most persistent pressure on domestic services. And it is driven by factors which are less exposed to global shifts. So the increase that Rachel Reeves introduced in the last budget to the national living wage and national insurance contributions has really squeezed businesses. And it really has actually had an impact on unemployment, which I'll come on to in a minute. But the cumulative effect of these high prices means that households are still facing higher cost of living than in 2021, particularly low income families. And while some energy price inflation has eased, food prices remain a significant factor. Um, Other factors that affect our UK economy is that there's a significant productivity gap between the UK and other advanced economies, especially the United States and Germany. And productivity has slowed dramatically over the past 15 years. And the key reason for the UK's poor economic growth is and stagnating standards is this under productivity. And the explanations include underinvestment in capital, infrastructure, and research and development in both the private and the public sector. And in fact, the analysis shows a widening productivity gap between the public and private sector, and with evidence that if the public sector had productivity had kept pace with the private sector since COVID, since 2019, then the economy would be significantly larger. Um, the next factor I've touched on is unemployment. So businesses, are contending with all these factors that I've spoken about. And although the official employment figures are debated, payrolled employees numbers are falling and the unemployment rate is rising. So there's a wealth gap that it has been emerging now over the past couple of years, and it is set to get wider. We as doctors are in general on the correct side of the wealth gap, and the point is, it's our business to ensure that we stay there. Um, Political uncertainty, of course, is playing another major factor, and I never really understood this properly when I was working. But the upcoming budget that everybody's talking about will feature a difficult balancing act for the government, and the um, fiscal rules require spending cuts or tax rises, but these risk, excuse me, stifling growth and business confidence. And the public, uh, the public debt is the final depressing thing that I want to tell you about on this slide, because for me, this is the most worrying feature of all. So public debt this is from just after the war, 1960, and public debt was about equal to the GDP. It fell over intervening years, had a wee blip there, and then after the global financial crisis, it has been steadily rising. So right now, our GDP is just about equal to our national debt, the government's debt. This is the forecast for the next 40 years or so, 35 years, excuse me. So the forecast is it's believed that we will by 2070, our national debt, our government's debt, will be about 250% of the GDP. Some forecasters are predicting that it will be as bad as 670% of GDP. And this is something that I wanted to raise your attention to, because this debt has been influenced by all the factors I have already mentioned. The economic forecasts are grim. And if your job's difficult today, you might be grateful that you're not Rachel Reeves. She has a completely impossible job to do, and will undoubtedly disappoint everybody with her budget. So whilst our pension contributions are currently safeguarded by government funding, you know, eh, crossing your fingers and hoping that the government in 2070 will have enough money to be continuing to fund and ring fence the funds for NHS pensions might be a way of being safe, but it's not really. Well, as an anaesthetist, we always had plan B, C, and D. And we kind of like to be safe. And I'm sure a lot of you would rather just be slightly more certain for yourselves, particularly the young people in the audience. To be honest with you, I'm going to be pushing up the daisies in some cemetery by 2070. So this is not going to affect me to the same extent as it will the younger members of the audience. But I think it's important that you're aware that this is what's going on in the background while you are trying to deliver a world-class service to your patients in the midst of a system that really is falling apart around you. And so this is just a wee bit of a wake-up call to say, you need to look after your health and you need to look after your money. And if you want to really ensure that you have financial stability in your retirement, now is the time when you're young to start making contributions to your wealth, so that when you are older, you don't have to panic about it. And the impact of compounding is massive. Just read some work by Warren Buffett and you'll understand the impact of compounding. So the sooner you start, the better for you in the longer term. So the final part of public finances that is a worry is this issue of private credit. Now, for those who don't know, private credit is capital that comes from non-bank lenders. And so it's funds that people other than banks lend to other people. And most people getting these funds are small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses. And medium-sized businesses, have turnovers of millions of pounds. We're not talking about people like me with tiny businesses. So in the US, since 2021, in the US and Canada, some pension funds have been investing about up to 10% of their funds in small and medium-sized businesses. And the reason for that is because they get better returns. But with better returns, like everything in life, there's no free lunch. So with better returns, there's always higher risk. And with some of the companies that these pension funds are investing their money in, some of them go bust and the pension money is lost. So that's the risk that is taken. But if the companies thrive, there are far better returns because, somebody, for example, was to invest with me or one of my colleagues. I'm not taking investors at the moment, but just as an example, and people who did invest with me when I was building my portfolio, I was paying 8%, interest per annum. Other people are paying 10 or 12%, depending on the size of the risk. If you're doing a massive project, I might, give you 12% if you were if there was a higher risk to your funds. So you can understand why people are trying to offset all the global impacts, all the global factors that are impacting the decrease in our economies. But so this is what's been happening in North America. And in April 2025, Rachel Reeves signed the Mansion House Accord and encouraged some of our private pension providers to unlock 50 billion. And that would only still be up to 10% of their funds. So it's not everything and it's not the end of the world, but it is a higher risk and it's not got a guaranteed income. So, yeah, so that's just saying the same thing. The worrying thing that I want to share with you is that what's happened just last week is that a couple of these private credit firms have collapsed in the United States, and the kind of growing popularity of this not unregulated funding is causing some concern. So institutional investors are increasingly, so I've said all that, sorry. So it's great when it works, but this is the news from America that has raised alarms. These collapses have highlighted the vulnerabilities of the funds. There's weak underwriting, high leverage, like I've said, high risk, a lot of opacity. So because the conditions of the lending are not standardized, they are tailored to each of the individual investors who requires the funding. So there is no standardization, there's no regulation around this. So it's great for investors who cannot get bank loans, but it's not good. So investors in the small businesses who cannot get bank loans because they're too risky, but it's not good for people like us who've put our money into, if you've topped up your NHS pension in a private pension scheme, that money might be getting put into, a higher risk as a smaller medium business, and that money could be lost. So this is another reason for us to be concerned and to ensure that what we're putting our own money into, we are being careful about, and we're definitely going to get some income from. So you are getting a heads up in decades of advance to ensure you live beneath your means, save every month, have an emergency fund immediately available, and then with the excess, you start to ensure you have financial security in the future. We already have a wealth gap in this country, and you're on the correct side of it, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm not here to scaremonger, just to raise your awareness to what's going on in the economy, which I think as doctors we've previously been sheltered for, and I am not, I'm not convinced that that is still the case. So I'm going to spend the final 7 minutes or so just talking about an easy solution for you to start investing. And hopefully you won't sleepwalk from this financially comfortable working life that you are currently living into your retirement where you're just scraping by. We talked about assets and liabilities, and I want to talk about property now because right now there are great conditions for starting to invest in property. The first is capital growth. These are the prices our parents, maybe some of your grandparents, paid after the war for properties, and now this is the average price of a house in the UK. This is the capital growth in Dundee, and you can see that we've had the yellow crosses are inflation rates, and you can see that the house prices are generally independent of inflation rates, and we've had a regular, constant rise or consistent rise since 2003, pretty static through the teens, but rising since 2017-18 after COVID with a huge blip, and over the last year in Dundee, a massive increase in house prices. The other important component is that rents have also increased. So since 2020, rents have climbed by 40%. So if you purchase a house and you rent it out, there's been despite the change in our legislation about 6 years ago or more, which is, excuse me, reflected in the Renters Reform Bill in England, which was passed in the Lords yesterday, I think. Um, we have had those changes, and so tenants are really protected in Scotland. But despite that, rents have still increased a lot since 2020. The other thing to note is this is a survey done by the HMRC last year on all landlords in the UK, and you can see here that in the next 5 years, a lot of landlords are thinking of selling up. And that's because of the changes in the legislation. A lot of landlords just can't be bothered now with things with all the changes that have occurred. It's a lot of hassle. But if you know how to do it properly, you just get on with it. It's not a big deal. And if you're coming into the business now at this stage, then it's not new, it's not a hassle, it's just the way it is. So there's a huge opportunity here for people to build a portfolio from retiring landlords who are selling up their portfolios. Everyone in the room, I'm sure, has heard of Warren Buffett, one of the best, if not the best, investor. With full of wisdom, who basically, this is one of its most commonly quoted quotes, pieces of advice. Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. And right now, so many people are fearful about what's happening in the property market and within our economy. So this is a real time to be greedy about property and investment, and ensuring that you invest wisely. The other important component about investment is that we have a housing crisis, which you have undoubtedly heard about. I heard about it, but didn't realize the extent of it or just the impact of it while I was working, because there wasn't really time to read in depth about it. But we've got about 10,700 households in temporary accommodation, and over 30,000 people homeless in Scotland. And in reality, that these are the numbers: 17,240 households, and of those 10,180 children, it's probably more. It's rising by the day. People are being evicted by the day. Now, can you imagine, living in a room with your children, kids coming home from school, having to do their homework in one room with the rest of their family? A kid has, sickness, the cold, or vomiting and diarrhea, and you're all stuck in one room. Um, Nowhere to thrive. And, the cost, the future cost to society for these kids who have no chance to thrive, and who may, there's such a connection between poverty, homelessness, and criminal behavior, that we've just got a ticking time bomb. Things are bad enough at the moment, but this is a huge um, thing for the future. And so, in my opinion, investing in property and providing homes for people who require them is making some sort of contribution. And let's face it, we're in medicine in general. We want to be decent people, and we're doing so much for society in our job. So it's kind of in our DNA that if we should be, we probably want to do other things. So it makes sense to me that to invest in property, provide homes, and get more and more children and households out of the homelessness and the housing crisis situation. So, if you want to invest in the UK, there are all sorts of things. I'm not going to go into all these in detail, but you can invest in residential or commercial. And I've only been talking about residential, and these are all the options that you can go through. And I'm only going to talk about this one. But you could buy properties that are ready to walk into. You could buy a student accommodation, which is, very lucrative. You could buy properties to do up and sell, which is not great in the current prices, because prices are beginning to level off now, and probably will level off for a wee while. Or you can do this, which is what most of us in property investing do. So what we do is we buy at somewhere, something that we can add value to, refurbish it, rent it out, refinance it. So get a mortgage on it for 70 or 75% of the new, what we call the done up value, and then repeat the process. This is the first one I did, and I'll just go through the figures at the end. I'm going to show you some photographs. So this is what it was like when we first cut down the trees that were hiding it from the street. And when you got in underneath that archway, this is what greeted you. And this was it after we cleared all that. This was the kitchen, and that's what we turned it into. This was the lounge, which became this. That's the utility room. You can see the poor guy who lived there. Like, he was trying to do all this work himself. He had, half the thing was rewired. It was a complete nightmare. So that became the utility room. And these are the numbers. So I purchased it for 75,000. The refurbishment cost 37. There was a 6% tax. It's now an 8% tax from the Scottish government on additional homes that you buy. The legal fees were about, I think, 1,500 for that. So the total cost to me was I put in about 118,000 or so in total. I then got a tenant in. He paid £900 a month, and after the mortgage and the building insurance costs, that gives me a cash flow of £366 a month. So when I mortgaged it, it was valued at 135,000. Remember, I paid 75 for it. Whoops. Um, and I got £101, 101,000 into £250 back from the mortgage company. So I had that to play with then for the next property and invest that, in the next property, which meant I had 17,000 left in the deal. So I've left just the guts of 18,000 in of my own money sitting in that, which I'll make up over the years. So I can help you start and scale your portfolio if you want to do something different. I've got 9 now, and I can help you. These are some of the things that stop people, that you need loads of money, you need expertise, and it'll take too much time. And there's no doubt that you do need money, expertise, and time, but you don't need all of them unless you want to do it full time like me. You can use money and experts to save your time, or you can use your time and experts to save you money if you have the time. But most of you, I suspect, will be in the position where you don't have the time, so you can use your money and experts like me or others. You might not like me, so um, you find somebody else. But maybe hopefully you would want to work with me. But anyway, you find an expert to help you and use your own money to save you time and get you started and start your portfolio. Um, these are the realities of hands-off investing. So you use somebody like me, a portfolio builder's education and knowledge. Also my power team, I've got solicitor, brokers, mortgage brokers, insurance brokers, all those folk. Got a building team, a compliance team, a letting agent who, so I've got all these people on my team. And so for you, the way it would work is, in year not, 2026, you might purchase three properties or maybe just one. You might just, some of my clients only purchase one property a year, and that's how they want to build, to just give themselves time to breathe in between. Or you could purchase three all at once and then wait for 5 years, refinance them all, get a whole big wad of cash from your refinance, and then build another three and do the same, wait another 5 years. So there are lots of ways that you can do it according to your own circumstances. The key takeaways really are that property can build long-term wealth. Hands off is 100% possible with the right setup. If you want to work with me, this is really how I sell what I do. I have told you already, I was a doctor, same as you, and these core values, I think, are the things that we all have in our roles as doctors. And I think that that becomes you. If you weren't already like that before you became a doctor, it certainly becomes how you are. And so that is how I conduct my business. And I'm not going to tell you, sugarcoat anything or pretend it is as it's not. So if you like that, then maybe we could work together. This is my contact details. These are my contact details. And that's all I had to say. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, sorry. Here, I've got some questions here. I beg your pardon. Gold shares doing well. Mosey in a deposit account. Is it a cash ISA that you would recommend? Oh, hi, Clive. Um, well, I'm not a financial advisor, as I've said, but it depends what you want. So, if you want instant cash access, then a cash ISA that like say you want to ensure you have, I would have my emergency fund in a cash ISA. So you want to have about 3, sometimes 6 months of your of your month's expenditure in a cash ISA, so that you can instantly, access it should you need to. But after you've got that in there, then stocks and shares ISA is the next good thing to let it build up in, because you can just let that sit and you'll be gaining interest, and you don't pay tax on that. So they're both useful depending on what your needs are. Does that answer the question?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Anthony, you're muted.
I'll have a go to get get folk started. Maybe I couldn't help wondering about your motivation. Is it that you've did I see two children you've got,
Yeah.
you and your husband, and in a way, is your motivation all for well, or the financial aspects of your motivation? Is it for them?
Well, yeah,
Because what I
yeah.
mean, who want? I mean,
Who would want it, do
why would
they?
anybody want a Lamborghini?
Well,
What is
yeah,
it
no,
about? What is it about
yeah, no,
what's
I hear
happened
you.
in our
No,
society that people would care
yeah, no, I hear
about
you.
a
No,
Lamborghini?
yeah,
But this is it to do with security for your children? Because you
my,
can't spend anyway. You're going to die
well,
first.
yeah, no, the first thing is you're absolutely correct. It's all about your why, and everybody's why is different. So some person's why is the Lamborghini or six Lamborghinis or their private helicopter. The other
Yeah,
person's is ensuring they have a trust fund for their grandchildren,
yeah, actually,
and so on and so on. My why, to be perfectly honest, was initially to fund the Malawi work.
yeah,
And then it's become clear that that's not going to be happening. So my why has changed, and it's partly to do with the work that I did as a doctor, and also what I've learned with the homelessness crisis. So, and before I retired, I was already talking to colleagues about this because we have a real problem across the UK, but particularly in, well, not particularly in Dundee, just the same as the rest of the UK. We have a lot of young women having babies who have very bad social circumstances to go back to. And I would really like to set up a place that was safe for as an obstetric anaesthetist, you see the women the next day if they've had a spinal or epidural or they've had critical care or something, you go and see them afterwards, make sure everything's working and that before they go home. And I saw a number of literally young girls, although they're women, they've had babies, but they're young teenage girls scared to go home to where they are living. And there is definitely a need for a place where women could go and have support with parenting skills and adult learning and, just all the thing, life skills and so on, before they get on their feet and before they go and live independently. So my big driver at the moment is to build a business so that I can fund something like that. And it's going to take me a long time, but that's what I'm driving towards. Now, I've spent a long time discussing this with people in Dundee, in Scotland, Scottish government, all sorts of folk. And with the laws that are in Scotland at the moment, it's not possible. But in my hometown of Derry in Northern Ireland, where I come from, there is already a setup similar to that, but it's specifically for women with addictions. And they have a brilliant setup, exactly what I had envisaged happening here. So that is something that's been functioning for about 20 years already. But what they do not have is a step down facility. So these young women are in a place where they have 24/7 support, and then they go from that to living independently. And what they need is a place that maybe has 5 or 6 rooms, that are set up like service accommodation type things, where there's kind of less intensive supervision and support, and the girls can start adjusting to life without that level of support before
very
they move into independent living. So right now, that's what I'm working towards. That's what I'm working towards my business building up to being able to fund. Um, so that's my why, but lots of people have different whys. If you've got a disabled child, you might need to ensure that you are leaving some kind of security for them. If we don't know, we could walk out there in front of a bus tomorrow, or some drunk driver or whatever, and suddenly you know, despite having all this financial security right now, after a year, you know, you're not going to be paid by the NHS, and you know the critical care insurance you have, you find the small print doesn't pay out to the level that you want to. All of these things, so there are millions of different drivers. And anyway, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, and everyone would have the same questions for themselves, and
Yes, of course.
absolutely, yeah.
Thank you for the question.
Good,
Anybody
yeah.
else got a question? Anybody else want to show their face? So that I can see who I'm talking to. It's really disconcerting looking at a screen full of blank faces, blank just
I agree.
names.
Yeah. I saw Tom McDonald there earlier. I haven't seen Tom McDonald for, I think, 40 years.
Wow.
And he's not changed. Where has he gone? Where's he gone?
Oh, it's great to see so
I
many.
think
So
it's
thanks
the
very
same
much.
guy. I don't know. There's someone.
Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope this has been of value. Oh, hey, sorry, you've asked Katie, do you think we should all have a financial advisor? Yes, you should. Absolutely. Yeah, I know. I'm not on commission, by the way. I'm not a financial advisor, but I think you know we don't really give enough time to thinking about our wealth. I think we do take it for granted. That we will have a a good income and a safe pension. And you know, I think for those of us who are, you know, beyond 50, we're probably grand. But for the younger people, I do worry that that might not be the case in the future. You know, Anna, you have a question?
Obviously, probably more of a bit of a comment. Thank you very much for the talk. I think it's really, really important to talk about these things. So it's great.
Thank you. I
that you
agree.
took the time. But I also really think it's important to talk about the housing crisis. So it's interesting that I almost feel like you should have led with that.
Okay.
Because I'm involved locally on activating the community council development trusts to build more houses for single parents, for women with disabilities who just cannot find a home. And that's a lot of my time. So actually investing my time into like a property isn't even something that occurred to me. So I just really wanted to say thank you for your thoughts on that. And I think it's important that we all kind of look at that, because in the end, the more people are looked after, the less work we'll have in the end, hopefully, as well.
Exactly. Yeah, and you make a great point. I mean, the connection between poverty and ill health is so well documented. You know, it's not even up for discussion any longer. And we already have a mental health crisis amongst our teenagers now. And I do, you know, I don't despair, but you know, I do worry about the impact of the housing crisis on the mental health of that generation of youngsters that really, you know, must be hopeless. You know, their parents are living is literally hand to mouth. And so I'm really glad. I would love to connect with you actually. You know, if you could drop me, if you don't mind, drop me an email.
Yeah, absolutely. Very
You know, if
interested.
you're doing that work, because I do think the more people we have speaking with a collective voice, the more likely we are to make some progress on this kind of issue. And women, you know, without getting on a soapbox or anything, but these women have no voice. And I do believe that because we're seeing so many, we see the whole section of society in our job. And we probably see the impact of this of poverty more than anybody else in any other job.
I agree with you.
Yeah, so we're in probably a privileged position in terms of the education about the impact of poverty than most of the rest of society. So I do think we have an opportunity to really help in a meaningful way those women who don't have a chance. So I'd be delighted if you drop me a line, you know, and see if we can work together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Yeah.
Uh,
But what do you make of the huge philanthropists? You know, the internet billionaires, where some of them, I think, are planning. I think Bill Gates and his family are planning a foundation. I think, and it's
Yeah, no, but some of them are doing amazing things. And Tom Hunter's our own,
Tom Hunter,
yeah, local lad doing great stuff, and Bill Gates has done an amazing amount for global health. Um, so they've got their Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which has just been phenomenal. And in terms of immunizations, HIV work, all this kind of stuff, and global health, and probably other things around America that I'm not aware of. But yeah, there's a lot of people doing a lot of great work. Um, and we're lucky, to have them. And then, I guess there's a bell curve of decency around the world. There are also
there's the
billionaires who are
opposite.
not doing
Yeah,
who are not doing great work
yeah,
and are being,
yeah.
so we've just got to be grateful for the ones that really want to help and are doing something useful, I think. But I do think we all have an opportunity, no matter how small our impact is. It's like drops in the ocean. We might as well do something good.
Very good. Oh, here's a
Lynn Urquhart, I know a public hood nightmare with tenants who can't pay. They are then advised by social work not to leave the property as it means they're voluntarily homeless and it takes court orders, etc. Is this a small problem? Could it get worse with the cost of living crisis? Great question, Lynn. Um, so that's absolutely the case. And so, touch wood, so far I haven't
Oh,
had
God.
that. But there's no doubt that you can. I think there are several components to this. Um, First of all, where you select your properties. If you buy, there's certain streets in Dundee that I would not invest in because I know that I won't get good tenants living there. Then the next, because people like us won't go and live there. People like our colleagues wouldn't go and live there. So if that's the case, I'm not going to invest there and expect someone else to live there. Um, the other thing is that then when you're selecting tenants, there's a process that is gone through. There's a Scottish Association of Landlords which gives guidance on how to select tenants, but I use a letting agent because that's their job and they know all the legalities and it's bread and butter to them. So I pay a letting agent to select my tenants, and so you can so by doing that, just buying in a decent area, selecting your tenants carefully, in general, that can protect you a lot from this sort of thing, but it can still happen, and it's very difficult to get tenants out. But there are clear guidelines on how you get tenants out, but there have to be 3 months of people not paying, 3 consecutive months, and it's only on the fourth month that you can start the proceedings, and the proceedings can take months. So yes, it can be an issue. But I mean, one of my tenants, two of my tenants are employees at the university, so I'm waiting to see what happens with that. I'm hoping that they're not going to be made unemployed. But yeah, I mean, stuff happens, so you can do what you can to mitigate things, but it's a bit like I was saying about you walking out in front of a bus. Stuff can happen to all of us unexpectedly. All you can do is try to mitigate the risk to your best ability, and then yes. So yes, there we are. Yeah, I hear you. So there are two sides of it. And if there's a way, I think I certainly haven't had that myself, but I do know of colleagues who have tenants who've been in that position and they've been able to decrease the rent to help people out for whatever number of months, as long even if their business is big enough that they can take a hit or make a loss. I know loads of people that have done that in order to prevent their tenants from losing their homes. So there are ways. I think if you can talk to your landlord, some landlords are not very reasonable, but in general, I think with this change in legislation, and a lot of landlords who didn't really look after tenants will be leaving the area, um, or leaving the whole thing of being landlords. Then it may be the case that the quality of landlords increases, and that people do start because there's a real awareness, certainly in the circles and the networks that I'm in, of this type of situation entirely, and ensuring that you look after your tenants. But at the same time, if you've got tenants who just really mess you around and never pay rent and mess the property up, and or they're growing a weed, or they're having, breaking windows and causing upset to the neighbors. There's a lot of issues that people have to deal with as well. So I hear you, and it's no joke, really, having to leave your home. So yes, Clive, yes, I have one HMO with students in it, and it's just working like a dream. Sorry, somebody with an iPhone there has their hand up. I don't know your name. Hello.
Well, hi there, it's Dave Ashcroft here.
Hi, Dave.
Just going to quickly ask you, what should I do with my lump sum when I retire? Should I invest it in property in Dundee?
Well, you should talk to your financial advisor, and you should take their advice. If you want to invest it in property in Dundee, then get in touch with me, and I'll happily take you through the whole process. I'd happily chat to you about it if you want, but I wouldn't advise you what you should do with it until you seek your own independent advice. Certainly, I don't have any other investments. All my investments are in property. I think anybody who's wise has got investments right across the board. Property, crypto. Well, crypto, if you're into that. I think the days of making a lot in crypto might have passed. Lots of people have made loads of money, but right now, it's up and down. Um, but things like government bonds, stocks and shares, I mean, you really should be having money in all sorts of different investments. But certainly, if you want to start in property, I think that would be a very wise move. And if you want somebody to take you by the hand and get you your first investment and help you through, then I'd be delighted to do that. And you don't have to have a huge portfolio, but in general, I've shown you the evidence about how the capital growth and the cash flow works, and it's it, you know it's everything has risk, but so do like your stocks and shares. You need to leave them for 20 years really to get the benefit. So that's a bit of a politician's type answer. Yes, you should. No, you shouldn't. Get some advice. But if it was, I mean, I'm, my proof is in the pudding. I've invested all my lump sum into property, and the rest, and I think I'm really glad I did. I wouldn't have thought about it until I was looking at another way. If I hadn't been looking for a way to fund the Malawi work, I would never have thought of investing in property. But now I just think, oh, it would be madness not to. Does that help?
That's great. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Are you going to invest?
I'm with Dave actually, his wife, and we're in the car with my couple. But I just wanted to ask you, my experience through our children in flats is that letting agents are terrible. They don't respond to call outs. So I actually own a property and I manage it myself because I then respond to things quickly and as good a landlord as I can possibly be. So what's your experience of that? Thank you.
I manage my own properties as well, but I only have 9, and because all of mine are, I've bought them in poor condition, so I've completely rewired everything, and I've put in new, white goods and new boilers in some of them, and so on and so on and so on. So they're starting off from being in a good position. So it hasn't really taken. I don't really get many calls about them. I've given one of mine over to a letting agent, one that I have in Hawick, only because I didn't, want to, have to travel to Hawick to do the landlord checks. But yeah, I agree with you. Our kids have both had terrible experiences with letting agents. In fact, you know, what our kids weren't aware of is that on the PRT, the landlord's name is there as well as the letting agent, although the contract is with the letting agent. Um, and the landlord's name and contact number should be on the PRT. So the kids, one of the kids had to in fact, both of them each had to contact the respective landlords for properties that they were in that they could get nowhere with. Like one of them had a leaking bathroom, it was pretty grim, and they could get nowhere with a letting agent. And then it had to contact the landlord directly, and the landlord was not aware of the issues and hadn't been contacted. So that was a pretty useless letting agent. It's not an uncommon problem. I have a local letting agent that who I work with who selects my tenants. And then we discuss them, you know, so he'll shortlist them and then we'll kind of go through after the credit checks and everything, we'll go through them together and choose the tenants. But he's someone I would trust to let them, you know, eventually I'm going to hand it over because I want to focus on the sourcing business. And I'm going to let him manage my portfolio in about a year's time. And he knows how I work. And I think that makes a difference. He knows what standards I want, but I completely agree with you. It's an absolute nightmare as a parent, listening and watching what they're going through and just not getting anywhere with letting agents. So it's a variable feast. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. The numbers are dwindling. It's 2:10. I'm happy to take any questions because I'm not under pressure, but if anybody needs to go, yeah, well, you've all gone anyway. Not all, but there's a few people left. But any other questions? I'm happy to stay on. Thanks, Catriona. Okay, thanks, Clive. Thanks for coming along to listen. Thank you, Anthony. All the best. Thanks, Ali. All the best, folks. Bye for now. All the best.
Take care.
Thank you.